Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Party Pixie Procast. No, wait. Everybody, welcome back to the Porta Party Pancast.
Did you write these down?
Everybody, welcome back to the Plosive Cast.
This is
I
not
can't do this. Nothing's working for me. Can one of you guys just do this?
Welcome back to the PetaPixel podcast.
Yeah, that's it. Cool. Nice work.
I'm Jaron Schneider. That was Jordan Drake, and that's also Chris Niccolls.
Hi.
Hey, everybody. We got a fun show today because there have been some entry-level cameras dropping recently, so we're going to talk about best options available today. But I want to kick things off by going back into entry-level camera land. Guys, what are the entry-level cameras that you have actually owned with interchangeable lenses? Like we're talking here about entry-level mirrorless cameras today. So while you guys are thinking back on that, I'll kick it off. I never had a film camera with interchangeable lenses, and I want to stick to digitals here because we've all heard about like some of the early film bodies and stuff like that. So my first was the Canon Rebel XT, which I paired with the 17 to 85 millimeter IS lens. Does anyone remember that lens?
Oh yeah, for the fancy one for the digital SLRs.
It was like here's your upgraded lens option. Yeah, that lens.
It was a good
sucked.
lens.
No, that lens was terrible.
It was better than an 1855.
It was.
Plastic,
I'll give it that.
Yeah.
But man, I was like, oh, I'm going to really want that extra millimeter is going to make all the difference for me. And that lens was terrible until like 24 mils. It was so incredibly frustrating that I very quickly moved up to a 50D that I purchased with Canon points and left entry-level land until a few years later, when our first kid was born, I actually picked up a little Sony a6300 because I wanted a small camera with banging autofocus that could also do some little video clips. And that camera actually served me surprisingly well, considering everything else I was using was like big pro, mirrorless cameras or like the GH bodies or something like that. Guys, which entry-level interchangeable lens digitals did you ever purchase?
Oh, my first digital interchangeable lens camera was a Nikon D70. I don't even want to talk about how much money I spent to get that, considering...
Was it an S or a regular?
I think it was the original 70. And it was something like $2,800 Canadian. I think that was with employee pricing. Like, it was a lot of money. And a decent camera, but an entry-level camera. And I think that came with an 18 to 70, if I'm not mistaken. And it
3.5 to 4.5. Yeah.
It wasn't a bad lens. So that was my first setup. And I mean, it worked well. It did. I mean, I'd like to have one again, to be honest, and give it another try. But yeah, that was my first.
That'd be a fun episode. Do you ever miss the 1/500th of a second sync speed?
No, I never used it. I used it 0 times. No. What I missed was the $3,000 that I spent on that camera to take family baby photos.
So you guys both purchased kit lenses then with yours?
Mine wasn't available as a standard kit. I saved it because I could have gotten an XTI with a big 2.5-inch screen and 9 autofocus points. And I was like, no. I got to bank that cash for the 1785 and get a 1.8-inch display with 7 autofocus points like a schmuck. But at least I had a big soft lens to carry around on it.
Yeah, okay.
It made sense because they basically threw those in, right? I mean, it was like $150, $200. It made sense. I mean, I think everybody, it's not a trap, but everybody fell into that trap, so to speak, right?
It's not a trap, but everyone fell into it.
It's not a trap. I mean, it's good to have a general purpose zoom. I think entry-level cameras should have an entry-level zoom, but no, they're obviously not great. I don't think I switched over to anything decent. I think I got a 50 mil lens. And basically, once we started doing the channel, you're really just playing with whatever cameras you have on the channel now.
So Jordan already mentioned my first entry level camera. I had the XTI. I bought an XTI, and I
loved that big screen. 2 extra focus.
It's because you're so young and baby faced. You're so baby faced today.
Yeah. So before I go on, I will say Jordan didn't notice. I had to point it out, and I guess you only noticed because I put a note here. But I'm clean shaven today for the first time in about a decade.
I noticed.
I decided to do it because I saw Jordan's cheeks for the first time in a long time, and I decided I wanted to show mine as well. Not those cheeks, the other ones, the ones in your face. Anyway.
All the viewers are so disappointed at that.
I didn't buy a kit lens with my XTI. which is why I brought it up. It's like I decided to not fall into that trap when I bought it, but I ended up buying a lens that was not great anyway. I got the Sigma 28-70 f2.8 to 4 DG.
Oh, we've talked about that.
Yeah, I still have the lens. I found it. It's in the other room, but that was my kit lens in air quotes. And then I later upgraded, air quotes again, to a 60D, which I would still qualify as entry level. But it had video capability, and that's why I got it. And I used the heck out of that 60D for a while before I eventually got a pretty high-end Canon camera after that, and then GH4, I think was my first.
Chris, I feel like we're missing one, because you were a big fan of the GM1, GM5s, which I would consider entry-level interchangeable.
Sure, but that wasn't that. That was my first. You asked the first. That was down the line. I mean, I got a D200 eventually, which I really didn't need, and then I got the GM1. I got the GM5, and those I used for like travel, Hawaii and stuff like that, which was great. I mean, they're fantastic for that. And I started to really kind of get into mirrorless and away from DSLRs because I appreciated the smaller size. But they were great, and I missed them, and I should never have gotten rid of them. There's quite a few cameras I should never have gotten rid of. I just hate having a camera sitting around doing nothing. It really bugs me. Like, it really bothers me. So I end up selling them because I'm like, somebody should be using it.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't have my XTI. I sold my XTI to a friend of mine, and I sold my 60D as well. So I don't have either of those either. But I did keep my piece of junk Sigma lens. Just because
thank God.
Sentimental value. Yeah, it's in the other room. At any rate, this week
I think we have a podcast to do.
We do. This week was really busy. There's tons of news to cover, so we're gonna hit that, and then we'll talk about entry-level cameras again, because there are a lot of good ones out there right now, and I want you guys to talk about your favorites. And with that, let's get going.
As usual, we are very appreciative to OM System for sponsoring today's podcast episode. They have a really good, interesting deal here because, of course, it's Black Friday now. Black Friday pricing. I know everybody's waiting until now to spend all their money, and a good time to do it is with OM System because there are incredible savings on OM System gear that you're not going to want to miss. So, limited time, of course, you can get $1,200 off the incredible flagship OM1 Mark II when it's paired with the powerful Zuiko 150-600 f5 to 6.3 IS lens. This would be an incredible wildlife package. I love how rugged they are. I don't have to worry about it out in the woods. Also, you're getting tremendous reach, 1200 millimeter full frame equivalent reach with that lens. Good autofocus, fast burst rates, and it's nice and compact. So if you want that sort of wildlife nature shooting, enthusiast, weather seal construction, $1,200 is a huge savings. You can effortlessly capture birds, remote nature subjects. 1200 millimeters reach is just great to have. And that's not all, because OM System has nearly every other lens on sale right now as well, with discounts up to $700 off. It's the ideal opportunity to expand your kit, to upgrade to the lens you've had your eye on, or to get into OM System for the first time and get started. Perfect gift as well for the holidays. So whether you're looking for a new camera or the right lens for your next adventure, check out OM System's Black Friday sale event. It is starting very soon. So explore.omsystem.com/PetaPixel. That's where you want to be. The offer ends December 8th, so don't take too long.
That's worth a segue, because I was over at the Japanese Gardens again this past weekend.
Yes,
because it's like fall, it's deep red there now. It's
man.
Very pretty. I have been there multiple times recently, and I go during member hours, and I can usually find a parking spot. Where we parked when we went, we just had that really small, close parking lot. Not this time. It was packed out, super busy, full of members.
Did you get there early?
Yeah.
As well, or
Wow. So you get there early, and you're there before the general public can get in.
Yeah.
And it was crowded. But I also like to look around and see what cameras people are using. And there were a shocking number of OM System cameras this time. I mentioned it a couple weeks ago that I saw a bunch of Nikon cameras the last time I was there. This time it was OM System and Canon. So
wow,
people are liking them. I saw multiple people getting really close up to trees, or also putting like these big zoom lenses on to get like the leaves that are in the distance for some compression. I don't know. People were really enjoying it.
Are you allowed to bring tripods in?
Yes.
Members
okay.
are.
Yeah, you get a little.
I think
we
have like photographer packages too, right? Like if you're specifically like a pro photographer.
Yes, so that allows you to sell the pictures if you get that one. They give you the license to sell them, which is neat. And it's like
someone's got to pay for all those bonsai trees.
They have like a whole bonsai setup on the side too. There's a bunch of them, and those are also all turning colors. It's really pretty, really nice.
I'm surprised. No, I guess I'm not surprised it's so busy. It's a fantastic garden. It rivals ones in Japan, honestly. But the colors aren't even in full swing yet, right? Like it's still kind of early, isn't it?
It's pretty strong. I would say if it wasn't wet out, the tree, I'm putting that in air quotes.
Yes, the maple.
Everyone liked your picture that you took. That tree would probably be getting redder if it wasn't raining so much, but the rain is knocking the leaves off, so it's not as vibrant. There are some other trees. Yeah, there are some other trees on the premises that are actually much nicer. But not as popular, that are like really, really nice colors right now.
I like that you have that live cam so you can kind of see, like, is it worth going down today?
Yeah.
But yeah, wild. And that's, so like OM System, I always think of them more as like a great outdoor camera, adventure camera, because the lighter weight and the smaller lenses. Not typically something I would consider for like landscape. Obviously, you can, but I mean, I'm like, landscape in a garden, you can get away with a bigger camera, with dynamic range, yada yada yada, higher megapixels. So it's interesting to see that people still really dig that small system.
Yeah,
that's why I was asking about tripods, because it is really nice not to have to drag one around. You get like super stabilization, and you can do their digital ND filter. So you got like nice glassy water. You're shooting handheld. If you want more resolution or DR, you could do handheld high res mode.
Yes,
so actually an OM would make a ton of sense, I think, for that.
The people who were using tripods were all using Canon and had some big glass, and I wasn't really sure why. I saw several big white lenses. I'm like, what do you they were like lined up to shoot the tree, and I'm like, I don't know what I don't know why you're using a 200 millimeter here, but sure, I guess there's not that much room between the sidewalk and the tree, and they also stanchion it off, so if you're going to take pictures of the tree, you have to be within these stanchions, and if there's no room, you have to wait. So they're aware people want to shoot that tree. All right, enough about the Japanese garden that everyone should visit. By the way, the camera that Chris was mentioning is you can go to the Portland Japanese Gardens website, and they have like a fall tracker, and they take a picture every morning, and you can see the status of like multiple trees in the area. It's neat, so you can tell when you should go.
I could turn the camera outside to my backyard. It would depress and horrify all of you. It's snowing.
Is it dead? It's snowing?
There's snow. Yeah, there's snow. It's gray. All my I have a red maple, and it was beautiful, and now it just looks very sad and lonely and cold. It's horrible. It's horrible, and it's horrible for 6 months.
I scraped my windshield for the first time this morning, and
it's always depressing.
Rough. It's crazy. My Japanese maple in my backyard is still green. It hasn't.
That's because you live in a tropical paradise rainforest.
Oh, man. All right. So let's talk stock news. The biggest story of the week that is at the top is that Apple didn't announce it, I guess. It was more Pixelmator announced it, that they had entered into a written agreement to be acquired by Apple. That includes Pixelmator, Photomator, and Pixelmator Pro. Pixelmator Pro is like their Photoshop equivalent. Pixelmator is their iOS and iPadOS version. And then Photomator is closest equivalent would be Lightroom, but it's more like a juiced up photos. You can do a lot of the same things that you can in Lightroom, but not everything. Sorry, Chris.
You'll have to tell me more about the software because I'm not familiar with it. It's like this is like a Disney Cars movie spinoff thing or something like that, or is it like?
I believe he's referring to Pixar there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm confused.
All right.
What is it?
Too. Pixelmator is probably the most popular Mac-only photo editing application.
That's probably why I never used it.
Yeah, it's Mac only, and they basically already relied on Apple for a lot. And I did a test actually with Jeremy on the team. As I called him into a meeting, I was like, "Have you used the Apple Photos app? Like, how familiar are you with it?" And I showed it to him on screen. He's like, "Yeah, I've seen that before, whatever." I'm like, "Ha! Gotcha. That's not the Photos app. That's Photomator. They look the same until you click like one button. They're very similar. So I actually will write a story about this later this week. I've written a couple already about how this is a chance for Apple to do something big, that is compete with Adobe. But the one that I will write later this week is what I think is actually going to happen is that Photomator will just get sucked into Photos. They may keep the name or they may revert it back to something else, but Pixelmator will likely maintain its being a standalone app. So they'll have Final Cut, Logic, Pixelmator, and Photos for managing a lot of creative applications.
Yeah, I actually have both of those apps, and like Jaron said, it's very similar to Photos. But what I find interesting, and some people have pointed out, is the way that they tier them is quite different from Adobe. And I think that would actually give Apple some kind of competitive advantages because, like you said, you've got one that's kind of I always get them mixed up, so I'm not even going to try and remember which is which. But essentially, you've got one that feels like it's sitting right between like your basic Photos and like a Capture One Lightroom, and then a tier above that where it feels like Lightroom, but with like the ability to do layers and things like that, which I think would actually make a ton of sense if you're planning to actually go head to head with Adobe on this creative side, is just to say like, look, we've got basically Lightroom with some more advanced functionality. I think that'd be really appealing. And it actually nestles in really cleanly with Final Cut, where we're like, no, you're not going to be using this for major motion pictures or high-end color grading, but it's a basic editor with some really advanced functionality. So you can get done like what most independent creators are doing. And I really see this slotting into that exact same mindset. So it makes a lot of sense. And the big question is, are they going to bring back the Aperture name, Jaron? Do you think it'll happen?
I do think that Photomator and Pixelmator are not very good names.
Those are bad names.
And Apple will rebrand these in some way. And I think Apple has been on a kind of a move of return to form over the last few years, ever since getting rid of Johnny Ive, which is one of the best decisions they've ever made. And a lot of their devices kind of harken back to previous designs. Yeah. They kind of lean on ideas they've done in the past and made them new. I totally see them reviving Aperture, whether that be Pixelmator or they change Photos into Aperture. Maybe they have two versions of Photos, the one that's on your phone and the basic one on your computer, but they also have Aperture, which is going to give you more advanced functionality. I don't know. That's what I'm hoping for, but I do think that bringing Aperture back would bring so many cheers. Like if we were in that auditorium during an iPhone launch, if they say an Aperture's back, we'd be like, oh yeah, finally.
They'd be like, what do you miss about Aperture? And I'd be like, I don't know, man, a whole lot of nostalgia in the name, but woo! It'd be great.
Yeah. One of my tinfoil hat theories that I put on Threads this past week was that in light of this acquisition, I thought back on it, and one of the reasons I think that Apple hasn't joined the Content Authenticity Initiative and is not really a sign-on to use C2PA is because it was founded by and continues to be led by Adobe. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's been rumors that the reason Aperture shut down was because Adobe and Apple came to a kind of a gentleman's agreement that Adobe would be the Apple suggested application for those things. And then Adobe would make sure to prioritize Mac performance and updates. But then a few years ago, Adobe showed up at a Microsoft event and started pushing on Microsoft. And that same timeline sees Final Cut getting way better, a huge push of investment into that software. And now they've acquired more software that competes directly with Adobe. I think Apple was like, well, you know what? Fine. If you're not going to continue to be our main supporter when it comes to creative apps, we'll do it ourselves. I don't know if that's ever going to be something that I can prove, but it would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm buying into your tin hat theory.
I was planning on bringing some tinfoil in here so I could put it on, but I forgot my prop, and I apologize. At any rate, we'll see what happens here. I don't expect to see anything out of this for at least a year. They still need to get regulatory approval, and then Apple will likely let this continue for a while until at least next iPhone launch, where they'll be like, they'll start featuring it more. Probably not for another couple years until we see some real advancements here, but neat stuff. Speaking of Apple, last week was their Mac week, and they announced 3 things. A new M4 powered iMac, a redesigned M4 Mac Mini, and a brand new M4 Pro and Pro Max, or just Max, M4 Max, MacBook Pro. So they've got new laptops and 2 new desktop computers.
I have thoughts.
I'm interested in none of them.
I do think they've done some really interesting things here, because I've always found, like, do not buy the base model of any of these products. Especially, they tend to be like 8 gigs of RAM, which has been a real strike if you're planning to use any of these stuff for creative applications. So moving everything to 16 gigs is really great. That's something a lot of people I've heard are saying, like, that little Apple, the new M4 Mini, for like $600 is like one of the most screaming deals if you're looking for just like a basic desktop kind of thing. It looks really sweet. And then they're also introducing Thunderbolt 5 into the MacBook Pros. So if I need to move 80 gigabits in a second, I don't know. Do you guys ever feel like you need to do that?
It's really good for daisy chaining, I think, is the main benefit here. You can do more with the daisy chain. I like Thunderbolt. I use a ton of Thunderbolt peripherals, so I'm not going to complain about using the latest generation, although I'm not sure how much of a benefit it'll affect most people. Yeah. The MacBook Pro has a new nano texture display.
Yeah.
And the way they're doing it is different than the other nano texture displays. So the Pro Display XDR and the iPad Pro have it, but it's actually etched glass because both of those have glass surfaces. The MacBook Pro doesn't have like a glass. It's different. It's more of a traditional LCD. But they did it on the inside of it, so that it still works. But someone asked Apple in a discussion that I overheard, and asked them, like, can you use other cloths? Because nanotexture requires using like the Apple cloth. Yeah. Technically you can, but they still recommend using the Apple one.
It won't burst into flames if you touch your cloth onto a nano crystal display. Yeah. I think it's interesting with the iMac they're offering that, which is 24 inches for a $200 premium, but I think it's still like $1,200 or something to get a cinema display with the nano texture. It's a massive premium. So I'm also wondering, like, did they figure out some way to streamline that process and make it like, a fifth, a sixth?
The XDR display is so old that it's like it's older.
Does it have a lightning connection?
I don't think so. It's just an older Apple pricing model that they used to do, that they're not going to go and reduce that price because it sits there and whatever. I just think that at some point they're going to need to upgrade or offer some other displays because it's prohibitively expensive.
I want Chris's sorry, go ahead, Jen.
I was going to say, it's back when they were charging extra for the wheels on the
right.
Mac Pro. Okay, go on.
No, I want to know Chris's opinion because this has blown up the internet, and I want him to weigh in. Chris, the new Mac Mini is very, very small. Okay. They've moved a headphone jack and some ports to the front, so you don't have to reach around back to use them. They've put the power button on the bottom of the computer. How do you feel about this?
What?
Okay.
Do you not care
Chris
at all?
Chris is indifferent.
The power button on the bottom of the computer?
Like it's underneath it. Like you have to lift it up to push the button?
That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Bring back John
weird.
Ives. He'll fix it.
Johnny Ive. It's weird because the power button on the Mac Studio is located on the back left, and it makes perfect sense there. If you want to hide it and prevent
it's out of your way.
Yeah, and it works. I don't know why.
Is the intention that you leave the computer on all the time?
Yes.
Just let it go into sleep mode. I mean,
that's what most people do. Yes.
Sure. Well, and when I want to shut down my computer, I click shut down. I don't.
But how do you power it back up?
That's God, no! You can push the power button, but
on what? The bottom of it?
On the keyboard.
No, you cannot.
On a Mac Mini?
Correct. At least you can't do it wirelessly.
Okay, because I've got behind me an iMac, and my keyboard, I just push the power button on it, and it fires up.
So that works there. I will double check. So at this time, we're still working on our review at the time of recording. When we publish, our review will be published of both the Mac Mini and the MacBook Pro. So
they're very cute. You know, like I'm not trying to be indifferent. It doesn't interest me yet. Mac still doesn't interest me yet as a personal computer. I do, though, like the mobile platform. I mean, I don't like them, but the iPad Pros are very powerful and very convenient. So I like that. But again, the iOS is horrible. What can you do? You get used to it. So for a desktop, it's just still not there to interest me. They're very powerful. We don't really need expandability anymore. I feel like that's something I got to let go from my youth. I love the idea of building PCs and customizing them, but that's as much trouble as it is fun, as anybody knows. And so I get it, but it still doesn't interest me. I don't know.
Okay.
For desktop compuing.
Well,
I'm still going to stick with PC for that.
Sorry for boring you with Apple's launch.
Just put me to sleep with all this fruit talk.
Well, then let's move on to a non-fruit. Nikon had announced a new Nikon Z or Niccolls Z 28 to 135 millimeter f4 power zoom lens.
But this still doesn't interest me. Oh, Jordan, go ahead.
It is not. It's just a development announcement. We have no idea how much it's going to cost or when it will be in the market. But this design looks awfully familiar to something that I've seen from a different company, right, Jordan?
Totally. It looks exactly like the 28 to 135 Sony kit lens that was included with like the old FS700, FS7. Which was kind of interesting because it was all fully electronic. But because it was such an old lens, it had a weird latency to it that I always was really annoyed by. Like even using the manual focus, it had a beautiful manual focus clutch, but then you'd have like a slight delay as you were spinning it, which made it really hard to pull focus unless you had a proper follow focus system attached to it. And then the same thing with the zoom, like it did have a zoom ring and a zoom rocker, but if you used the zoom ring, it felt like you were a little disconnected, kind of like when you were using an old compact camera and rocking that ring to zoom it in and out. Felt a little bit like this. And this looks very similar. I mean, I don't know. I haven't got my hands on it. It just looks very similar to that Sony. And just like we were talking about with Sigma a little while ago, I want to get my hands on some of these and just see it. Yeah. We know that there's electrical connections on everything. How responsive is it actually going to be?
This, obviously what you're going to glean from this is Nikon, of course, did acquire Red. We've been talking about them, like, what are your plans for cinema? What are your plans for going forward? And of course, you expect them to be cagey because this is all brand new for them and they've got lots of plans, I'm sure. But it really does start to make me think like we're going to see cinema versions of their mirrorless cameras, right? Kind of like Canon does, or maybe like a Nikon box camera, right?
That'd be great.
And that's really appealing. It's very interesting. And it's obviously, I mean, I'm going to say obviously, I don't know anything, but obviously Nikon is now going to go forward into the cinema world like full tilt. So that's very exciting. How do you feel about the fact that it's a 28 to 135 and not like, Canon's 24 to 105/2.8, for example, very interesting, very compelling in a similar way. How do you feel about this more traditional 28 135?
Yeah, I mean, I do always miss having 24, and I think a little bit more extra wide angle is really useful on modern mirrorless to make way for a little bit of digital stabilization or something. I think that's really beneficial. So you're going to need an ultra wide to go along with this. And unfortunately, they don't have an announcement yet for an ultra wide. Sony did do exactly this. They made a power zoom version of their original 16 to 35. I'm feeling good about that. 2.8, which was a T3.1. So I expect we'll see something similar from Nikon. They're going to really have to cover the wide angle on this. But like I was saying, when it was first announced in the article there, like zooms are just a creative option that you don't have currently on Nikon, except for like, a couple APS-C power zooms and stuff, which are not going to satisfy filmmakers. So now you can get a smooth, consistent zoom, and we're going to have to see how it actually performs.
I'll say this is a pretty lens. Like I like the gold.
I like the look. If that's the style they're going for with everything video now, then sign me up. Throw that on a box camera. You got a stew going.
I want to point out that I don't think that this lens comes because they bought Red. I think it goes farther back than that. And I think that it looks like that's the case, which is great. It looks like Nikon has momentum. But lenses are in development for years.
But again, this is like what arguably their second cinema lens ever, their first power zoom kind of lens like this for full frame. So
it's the only full frame cinema lens that I'm aware of that Nikon has ever made. So I actually asked Jordan this, like, it was my impression that this was the first one that they'd ever done. No, Jordan pointed out that there was one in C mount, like long ago.
I knew they made a C mount. I don't know if it was a series, but I knew that existed, and I did confirm that it does.
Okay, so there's another one that we weren't aware of, and it was a commenter mentioned it. Yeah. It's a 10-100 f4.5 to 5.6 PD zoom for the Nikon One. Yes, and I'm
totally
like, that does not count.
That does not count.
I will not. I refuse to accept that lens exists.
Yeah, that does not count.
Yeah, and, I mean the C mount one barely counts.
In similar news, it doesn't end there though, right? I mean, there's other companies making more cinema glass.
Yeah, in this case though, it's hybrid. Canon at the same time, or just barely before it, announced 3 lenses. We'll talk about the first 2 first. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago that Canon said we're going to drop a bunch of lenses on X Day. Well, they did, and we guessed what they were going to be. And Chris was right. I think Jordan joined him, said the same thing. 2 primes are a 24mm f1.4 and a 50mm f1.4. They join the 35mm f1.4, and they're all the same size, but slightly different weights.
Right. But same chassis, and then it goes, so I guess we can talk about the primes first. I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, those are going to be your 2 next focal lengths that you would normally make. Obviously, if somebody's putting this on a rig, if they're doing, I mean, the weight's different, but the balance will still be fairly similar. Everything's going to line up the same as far as rings go. My only real thing here, and again, I haven't really played with the 35mm for not obvious reasons, but it's like. Being hybrid,
give us one. That's
the obvious reason. We don't have it.
Yeah, well, that and also I don't want to. But the 24 and the 50 sound very exciting. I guess my question here is, they're calling them hybrid lenses, but how far does that go? Is it just that they're making it the same size chassis, or are they actually doing more compensations for video shooters, like eliminating breathing? And is that going to then have any optical downsides for photography, like resolution, for example? I don't know.
We need to get these 3 lenses in before we can make any of those assessments. To close this out, that 24mm, it costs $1,499. That's the same price as the 35mm. And then the 50 costs $1,399. That's $100 less than both of those. But to get all 3 is a humongous investment. It's a lot.
I can already hear photographers are mad right now. They're throwing things at their computer screen right now. So please don't. You paid a lot of money for that monitor. Don't break it. But I get it, right? There's this kind of feeling of now I have to pay more money for a lens that I might want for photography, but I feel like I'm paying for hybrid features as well, and why?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we need to see them flesh out that mid-range, those 1.4 apertures. We keep saying, that's where third parties really excel, and that's why we want to see that lens mount open up. Hopefully you didn't chip a nano crystal display that cost you an extra $1,200 to add to your cinema display.
Yeah. But it doesn't end there.
Yeah, speaking of expensive lenses, Canon also announced a 70-200 f2.8 L IS-USM Z lens. That is targeted. It's very confusing that they went with Z because we have Nikon Z.
Right. The Z
a lot
mount,
of Zs. This lens is $3,000. Yeah, $2,999, and it can be purchased in either black or white, depending on your preference.
So this was interesting too, because in our previous a few weeks ago, we saw the sort of launch, the pre-release launch teaser for these lenses, right? And it was interesting. They were showing the chassis in silhouette, and they looked identical, right? It looked like a 24 to 105 2.8 chassis, and indeed, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, so you didn't think that was going to be the case.
I didn't. So you and I were right on it being a 70 to 200 2.8. We guessed that correctly. But I was like, I figured they're just using the same graphic design because it's easy. And the fact of the matter is, no, they're actually putting the exact same physical dimension chassis.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think the reason for this, I don't think a bunch of photographers will be banging down the door for those prime lenses, but there has been a lot of complaining about how the 70 to 200, 2.8, your only option was the collapsible one that wouldn't accept teleconverters. So now photographers get a classic 70 to 200 internal zooming lens that will accept teleconverters. So this is one I definitely expect will be a true hybrid lens. We'll see just as many photographers grabbing it as videographers,
albeit at a very expensive price point. You know what's adorable though is at least to alleviate maybe some of the anger for these photographers who don't want hybrid lenses, you can get this in either the classic Canon white so that you still look like a photographer on the sidelines, or you can get it in black so that you can be a stealthy cinematographer.
Well, what if they're like, look, let's call this a Z lens. We'll make the telephoto black, and maybe some Nikon users will buy it by accident. Maybe that was their scheme.
As a final note on this, the original 70-200 f2.8, that collapsible one, has a price reduction right now that brings it to $2,500.
Still expensive.
So it's cheaper, and apparently Canon thinks this price drop might be permanent.
That makes sense.
But they're not. They're being a little cagey about it.
I do really like that collapsible version though. Like it was very cool, very small, very good optically. But yeah, teleconverters are important. Like 70-200 2.8 with the 2 times is very versatile.
Yeah, and it was just not popular with video shooters because the weight shifted dramatically when you used that sucker.
Video shooters be damned.
We are. Don't worry.
All right, next story. Panasonic. Talk about them for about 10 seconds.
It's a video day today.
Yeah, it announced that it is bringing out 2 new camcorders. It's the first time it's done a consumer camcorder in 6 years. And aren't you excited, Jordan?
No, I'm not.
Yeah,
but I
shouldn't be.
Like whenever these come out, it's like if you're shooting outdoor kids sports, a camcorder is probably the device that you should have. I do still think there is a real place for it in those situations. If you're going to go to Yellowstone and not
you spend $1,000 on that? You're going to spend $1,000.
Expensive. Are they thinking this is going to be like an analog resurgence? Like, oh, we're going to start us and like everybody's be like, oh, camcorders are cool again and start using them. I mean, I'm sure there's some technological updates, but the fact of the matter is you're paying $1,000 for a camera, which would be a lot like what we had years and years and years ago.
Yeah,
Mega zoom, small.
$900. I take it back. I'm sorry.
All right. Okay.
Well, yeah, our Chris Monlux, who's now writing for PetaPixel.
Formerly a video maker.
Yeah, wrote an article saying like these things are archaic. They have no place in the modern world because until you hit like 100 millimeters, your smartphone is going to record better video unquestionably than one of these little super bitty sensor, super zoom cameras. But if you're going to live on the long end, then there's no alternative for you anymore, to be totally honest. So that's why I can see these at least like update the codec so it's not shooting AVC HD or whatever garbage it was on the previous 6-year-old camera. Like just some basic functionality like that. Maybe give it like, a USB-C port instead of a micro that was probably on it before. Yeah. For things like that. Yes. But I mean, this is not something, everybody's grabbing when they have their first kid anymore. It is a very small audience that should be looking at camcorders, but I think it's still fair for them to exist for that audience, and they don't need to update them very often. So I argue they should exist. Very few people should ever buy one.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be tons of these things used on the market that are barely used, or that people already have sitting in like a box in their closet. Like, I don't know.
Got to shoot an episode on one.
Yeah, we'll have to shoot an episode on one. Yeah, and I'm gonna go with it's gonna be over sharpened all to hell.
Yeah. Don't worry, Jordan. Sometime next month, you will be shooting with a camcorder. It just won't be this one.
Oh, God, yes.
Stay tuned for that, listeners. One of our annual traditions is going to keep going, and I'm going to make Jordan shoot with something he's going to hate. But we're going to move on for now to the last story of the week, which is the reason why this podcast is a day late. Nikon announced the Z50 II.
Yes.
Guys, talk to me a little bit about it.
We went to Japan.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, we did. So we went to Japan, and of course, I mean, we appreciate everybody watched. Not everybody watched, but we still appreciate. We did a tour of the Nikon Museum in Nishio.
You're back in North America.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, so I'm back to Nikon, and Yeah, and it was a fun trip and it was great. So Nikon brought us out there to check out the museum, which is really cool. But also we were able to combine that with the release of this new Nikon Z50 II, and our US representatives, like they brought it for us, and very, very cool little camera to play with. And this is interesting because APS-C as a format, Fujifilm dominate. Sony makes some nice cameras, but again, I don't feel like they get a lot of press. Like, not a lot of people are buying them anymore. And certainly, I think Nikon struggled with the ZFC and the original Z50, trying to carry that line. I love the ZFC, super stylish, but there are some things where you're like, I wish I had a bit more manual control or custom buttons or just a more traditional design, not such a vintage retro inspired design, but something with like a bigger EVFI cup and a larger grip and all that kind of stuff. And so this camera is very interesting. Japan's a good test because there's a lot to shoot. There's a lot of walking. There's a lot of traveling, a lot of different things to shoot, lots of different subject matter to shoot. And so I felt it was a very good test. I mean, Jared and I wandered around in like the dark because you can't sleep. And so we got a lot of low light shooting and stuff. It's a nice camera. I mean, we have a video out, which is going to be great. And I hope you guys watch that. But I don't know. What did you guys think about it? Because I think for Jordan, that's where the biggest updates were.
Yeah, I do really think I was a little disappointed in the original Z50, and then when they brought out the more video-focused Z30, and then the ZFC, which was supposed to be for hybrid creators, we just didn't see many improvements to the video, where we saw huge steps forward. It does internal 10-bit, which lets you record N-Log. It's got a tally lamp, fully articulating screen. When I was in Japan, I was like, man, that old one had a screen that flipped up like a hat, and I was wrong. It was an even worse design than that. It actually flipped underneath the camera, so if you used it with a selfie handle or put it on a tripod, you couldn't see the screen. It was just an atrocious design. So moving over to a fully articulating screen really rectifies that. And for a lot of people looking at entry-level cameras, they're going to want a viewfinder, myself included. So this does, I think we're really seeing the manufacturers kind of segment cameras in this price between like good video centric cameras with no electronic viewfinder, or photo-centric cameras with an electronic viewfinder and bad video. And this is actually a really nice middle ground. I think that's who it's going to appeal to.
Well, that sort of segues pretty nicely into our main story. But before we get to that, we've got a main story sponsor. Thanks to Tamron for sponsoring this week's main story segment. Capture every moment with Tamron's all-in-one zoom lenses, your ultimate photography companion. Tamron's high-quality, all-in-one zoom lenses offer photographers the flexibility to capture every moment, whether you're a professional or a hobbyist. Their 18 to 300 and 28 to 200 millimeter lenses cover everything from wide landscapes to detailed close-ups, all in one compact, lightweight lens. Perfect for travel, street photography, or family portraits, these lenses offer sharp image quality, fast autofocus, and a weather-resistant design. Tamron's holiday savings are happening now. You can save up to $100 on these incredible lenses, but hurry, that offer ends January 5th, 2025. It's the perfect time to upgrade your gear or give the gift of Tamron all-in-one zoom lenses to the photographer in your life. Visit Tamron's website to learn more and grab this limited time deal. Don't miss out on these holiday savings. Make sure to check the link in the description below to find out more. So, gentlemen, now that the Z50 II exists, it got us thinking about the best entry-level cameras right now, because this is still an important segment, right after the fixed lens stuff. And even fixed lens is now like premium. So if you're just getting into photography, what are the that you should consider? Let's start with you, Chris.
So largely my choices are going to be APS-C format. I think that it makes sense. APS-C is still, it's really become kind of the hallmark of the entry-level photographer, with maybe one exception, that being Fujifilm, because Fujifilm kind of can play both sides. But yeah, I would say the first camera that actually came to mind was the Canon EOS R10. The R100 is more of an entry-level camera, and I hate it. I think it's a bad camera. I think it's way too entry-level. Yeah. I feel like it almost insults people's intelligence to get it, to be honest.
It'll frustrate them.
Yeah, and frustrate them and not give them any room to grow. But the R10, it's been a long time since I used it, but I do recall nice ergonomics. It has an EVF. Nothing's going to be an amazing EVF at this point, but I do still prefer having one. I'm not every entry level photographer is 18 years old. Some of them are 50, and their eyes are just not what they used to be. And I know, like, I really need an EVF now for most photography. So I really like the R10. I wish Canon had better APS-C lens support, but yeah, you can use it with some full frame lenses and still get that extra reach. And I remember.
Yeah, Sigma Tamron
APS-C is the one area where Sigma is actually helping them out a little bit. So it's
a little slow. We haven't gotten everything that was promised, but it does bring up a good question, Chris. You mentioned the APS-C lens support. Should you get it with Canon's 18 to 150 or 18 to 45? Both of those are kit options if you choose.
I like the 18 to 150. I mean, for me, I think the Canon does a really good job of being like a good compact travel camera, walk around camera with the zoom. What they don't have a lot of is primes, like that's where you might want to go third party. But it is nice for wildlife. Canon has decent wildlife focusing even in that entry level market. And we got to shoot a lot of that, and it actually did a really great job. And I think that's a big appeal for a lot of entry-level photographers, is to go travel, get some wildlife pictures, get some, general purpose stuff on the street. And so I think the Canon R10 is a nice option for that. Very comfortable, very easy to use. Canon menus are very intuitive, which is, again, important for somebody just starting out. I guess I'll go into Fujifilm because that really is an interesting market. You can get really nice cameras, tons of lenses. I mean, that's probably one of their biggest strengths, the exact opposite of a lot of the other manufacturers. So many lens options, interesting lens options, and third-party lens options. And they've done such a great job with APS-C. My original statement was, yes, APS-C is kind of the realm of entry level, but Fujifilm has elevated it to something that people prefer because of the compact size for walking around street photography. X-T30 version 2, love it. I think it's a great camera. I think it's got that sort of manual dial control that a lot of people dig, but it still is easy to get into. It's fun to use. So it looks nice. I mean, it really does look very sexy on the shoulder. So I think X-T30 II is a great choice. Even the new Fujifilm X-M5, and the biggest knock there is going to be the lack of viewfinder for me.
But took one of mine, but yes.
Yeah, and you know what? It might be better for yours, like for your audience. So like you should still talk about it. But it could be a nice option for a photographer or really a hybrid shooter. But I think the X-T30 version 2 makes more sense. For Nikon...
Wait, hold on. Before you do that,
what
if you're going to buy one of these, what lens should you go with, a bundle option or one of the... I guess it depends on what you really want to shoot with it. But what would you recommend? The bundle options are with a 23 f2, a 35 f2, a 16 to 50 2.8 to 4, and a 15 to 45 3.5 to 5.6.
Yeah. I mean, the 1650 is great if you can do it. But I feel like with Fujifilm, like with Canon, I would go with the zoom. With Fujifilm, I'd probably go with some primes because you can kind of buy into that fun experience of choosing your focal lengths, using your legs, which is a great tool to set your framing and your perspective. And then, have some fun shooting that. Plus, primes, you do get to take advantage of the fact that you get more light for those smaller sensors, relatively speaking, to a full frame camera.
It's worth pointing out there's XC versions of some of those primes, optically identical to the more expensive ones. You are sacrificing weather sealing, and the focus motors are a little different. But on an entry-level camera, I think the trade-off is totally worth it, and they're even lighter.
So you're basically suggesting not going with the bundled lens options and going and looking around for your own. For what it's worth, the 15 to 45 is out of stock, and so is the 35. Not that you care, Chris. 35, but the 23.
Well, the 35 is nice. The 35 is great because it's a 50. It's the 23 I don't care about.
Well, that's the one you can get.
Oh, too bad. That's because nobody should buy it. No, it's like, look, the kit zooms are always a good option because they're affordable. So I would always recommend, if I go back to salesperson Chris from TCS days, I'd be like, get the kit lens. You have it. It's flexible, and you basically get it thrown in. So I would recommend that. But for Fujifilm, it'd be nice to get some of those primes and kind of rock that in a more creative way. Then Nikon, I mean, the Z50 II, I think it's a very capable camera. I like the ZFC. I'd personally go ZFC because I just love that styling. I'm okay with the more somewhat limited controls, and that's a fun experience. So absolutely go for that if you dig that retro look. But the Z50 II is very compelling if you want something that's going to be great for video, great for stills, very flexible. Maybe not as sexy as the ZFC, but very flexible. And so I actually enjoyed using that. And the only downside for me, and I am going to point it out, it is that it's still that older 20 megapixel sensor. And so from a reviewer standpoint, it's probably my least favorite of the APS-C sensors. But from a photographer standpoint, it doesn't really matter. They're all good.
What about a lens?
I used primarily the 18 to 150, which was fine. I'd probably go with like more just the general purpose kit lens, to be honest.
I think that would be their 16 to 50.
Yeah, 16 to 50. You get that nice wide angle. If you want to telephoto lens, get something more dedicated to it.
3.5 to 6.3 though. Ugh, that's slow.
Yeah, they're all going to be that way.
Yeah. Sorry, Jordan, I talked over you. You got anything to add? Of course you do.
I mean, if you're looking for, I would lean more towards hybrid here, because if you're just in video, get a Panasonic camcorder. That's the solution.
Right. Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah,
no.
Don't. Absolutely not. But
and then use that at 4 a.m. in Japan in darkness and see what happens.
Just get nothing.
Yeah.
It's just a black error screen. I did want to talk about a few that I think people should consider if they're looking more at video options, because especially like Chris mentioned, the R100, the Fujifilm X-T30 II, those are both more photocentric cameras, 100%. So I think there's better options from those manufacturers. The X-M5 that we talked about really surprised me as a video camera. Now, the one thing I want to point out with any of the Fujifilm stuff is just consistent video autofocus with a busier scene still seems to be a problem. We're still waiting for a full review on that camera. But even looking at higher end stuff like the XH2S I was just using, it does get confused sometimes. So if you're doing more static scenes like what I'm doing right now, or especially if you want to adapt lenses to it, that XM5 is absolutely killer because you're getting like 10-bit open gate recording with F-Log2, great dynamic range. Like the image quality from that camera is spectacular for the price that you're paying for it. It's truly impressive. So I would definitely look at that. Of course, there's also the limitation of no viewfinder. So I checked. You can still get a Fujifilm XS10, which has a viewfinder. Not quite as good a video camera as the XM5, but you get a stabilizer as well with that on that same 26 megapixel chip. So check that out. And it's one of the last ones where you can still get the 18 to 55 2.8 to 4. Very, very cheap with it.
I do.
I think it's like $1,100 now for the combo. Which
I kind of have to say nuts. It's unfortunate. Maybe it's in Canada, lens. But it's not here. The XS10 is discontinued in the United States, according to B&H.
I was B&H and it came up as in stock.
It says used.
Oh no! Oh, that's why that price is so good. Oh, yeah. You know what? Strike that from the record. XS10s are impossible. No, if you can get a used one, go to KH and grab a used one. That's a great camera. That Z50 II, as I mentioned when Chris was talking about it, is a very good video camera. And especially now that we've got all the Sigma primes. That's the big reason I was like, look, Z50, ZFC, Z30, none of them make a lot of sense as a primarily video camera because of that. But now that we've got all those Sigmas, that 18 to 50 2.8 is the lens I would recommend with it. That's a killer, compact, super affordable little lens that'll give you excellent results on it. So those are the ones that I was looking at probably as your best entry-level hybrid options at this point.
It's kind of unfortunate that we haven't seen much in Micro Four Thirds that is in this space.
I mean, again, look, like this list... There's so many good options that would be fine for an entry-level user, right? Like, really, my main statement would be this. You want to have interchangeable lenses. I think you should have an EVF personally for photography. And you want to have manual control, like, good manual control. But beyond that, that's a lot to really get started and be able to learn and grow. And then from there, you can see, okay, where do I want to go? The fact of the matter is, though, that when you buy into a system, you are investing in those lenses, and eventually you're going to reach that point where, like, well, if I want to now shift gears, it's going to require either expanding on that system or selling everything, right? And so that's where Fujifilm, I think, has always done well from a marketing standpoint, is they've really shown, like, okay, you're in APS-C, that's basically where you're going to live unless you want to go GFX. That would be quite the jump. But it's like, you can do it. It works.
Professional options, top to bottom.
Yeah.
There.
you've got that room to grow, and arguably other companies do as well. I mean, the Sony, like the A6700.
I was about to ask, A6700. It is significantly more expensive than all of the options you've mentioned so far without a lens, and it's APS-C, which Sony's really focused on full frame as a company.
Yeah. I just feel like, I mean, I love the A6700, but it's not an affordable camera. You could absolutely get into the Sony APS-C, but then I feel you're going to eventually be in that pull where you're like, I should just go full frame now with Sony, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, none of that APS-C stuff is going to work. So I love the menu. I think the menus are fine now. I love the real-time tracking autofocus. I still think for my money, that's the best autofocus for an entry-level user who doesn't want to customize, preset modes and tracking stickiness. Just it works. You just put your square on something and it just works. And I think that's big for entry level photographers. But yeah, OM5 from OM System is a nice, attractive camera. I love Micro Four Thirds. Sorry, Jaron, that was your original question. Mm-hmm. I do love Micro Four Thirds. I love what the portability is. I love the design is nice, and I don't mind the smaller sensor for image quality, but undoubtedly you are getting into a system where it will be ideal for some applications. It won't be ideal for some others.
Right.
And, I wouldn't use it for studio photography. I know you can. I know somebody is. I personally wouldn't. Okay. I wouldn't use it for landscape very often. I mean, yes, again, I love if I was traveling and hiking up a mountain, 100% I would take it. Like if I need to be as light as possible, 100% I would. But if I didn't need to be as light as possible, I would prefer a different tool, what I would consider a better tool.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth pointing out, it has been very quiet on the entry-level front for a while, which is why we wanted to do this episode in the first place, is like, oh, it's weird. We finally saw like 2 entry-level cameras released within a month of each other. But there's a couple holdouts I really want to address. One of those is Sony. I mean, I like the ZVE10 too, but I consider that a video camera.
Right.
It doesn't even have a mechanical shutter in it. And the A6100 and especially 6400 are very long in the tooth. I mean, both of those could really use an update. And yeah, Sony's saying like, well, we've got an extremely capable A6700 when you're into full frame pricing right now. It just isn't that compelling for a lot of people, I don't think. The other one I really wanted to talk about is Panasonic, because who remembers the G7? That camera was everywhere. I sold truckloads of those to like film students and people who wanted just a family camera when they don't want to buy a camcorder. It's weird they've kind of abandoned that entry-level Micro Four Thirds market pretty much completely at this point.
And we've complained about that ad nauseum.
I think that's a huge gap that's missing right now. And especially now that they've got phase detect autofocus, it would be very straightforward for them to just strip back the G9 a little bit, even put the old 20 megapixel sensor in with phase detect autofocus, and they would move a lot of those, I think. It's weird they've let it go.
The last thing I guess I'd throw in there is, especially if you're starting at entry level and you don't know what realm you're going to end up in, or even what brand, all the cameras that we've talked about, like the 6400, the A6100, older cameras like the XS10 from Fujifilm, Panasonic, like there's a lot, you've got GXs, you got G7s, you got all these cameras, even like a G9, go used. Like used is a great way. Used cameras are almost never really that used. They've got tons of mileage left in them. You'll save money. You can get those lenses without spending a ton of money. Then you're not really committing a whole bunch of funds and you can learn. So I know a lot of entry-level photographers, what they want to do is go to a camera store, talk to a sales staff. You'll get a lot of good recommendations, but maybe just look used. There's so many good cameras now, and there have been for a while. That whole we've plateaued for years now. So even a 3 or 4 year old camera is going to be awesome. Get a Sony A7 II used. There's so many options that you can get there, get you into the sensor you want, and then if you decide you want to change your direction later, you're not committed 100%.
There's one camera I will add in here as if you only care about video and you're only going to be walking around and doing quick fun shots.
I know the
with
camera.
Yeah, it's
Panasonic camcorder.
DJI Osmo Pocket 3.
Hell yeah.
$520. It will satisfy that need, and apparently everyone in the world owns one of these already. So I guess my recommendation doesn't matter.
Me.
Yeah, except Jordan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Smartphone in pocket. There you go. Wow.
So there we go. If you guys have any suggestions on cameras that might not have been mentioned here, let us know in the comments below. But we're going to move on to what have you been up to, Chris?
Nothing. It's been hectic. Nothing fun. It's been all basement. It's almost done, but still not. Things being put in not to code. So then you got to tear holes in the wall. I got holes in the walls right now. Trying to get furniture set up. I got this exchange student, so I got to put it. So it's been very hectic. So no fun, nothing interesting. Just stress and stress shopping and stress building, and that's what I've been up to.
Well, I'm sorry about that. Before Jordan goes, who has some really interesting things to talk about, I'll go quickly. I've been working on a model for like over a month and a half, and I finally finished it. It's right there in the corner over there. Nice. I also built here. This is better. I also built another cabinet with which to house it in. So that is there. I'm not set on this layout, but I'll get there. I haven't decided yet. We'll see. But yeah, that model. It's if you can see it, it's significantly larger than my other models, and I'm really happy with it. So there you go.
Nice.
It's a perfect.
So you taking a break now?
Yeah, I have put away my table and my light. I'm not going to build anything for a little bit. Nice. But I have some more models to work on. It's just I'm taking a break because that one took a while. It's like a lot of detail.
For those that aren't into Gundam that much, like that's a parental guidance rated Gundam
parental
model,
guidance,
right?
Yep. PG.
Yes. PG, not PG-13. It's PG, right?
Yeah, it's the nicest ones they make.
Yeah, it can use one non-sexual use of the F word when you're.
That's correct. Yes,
yes, and maybe like heavy petting can be shown. So is that like those take like 3 months to build?
If you're doing it as detailed as me, so I was panel lining and painting as I was completing parts. Yeah. So it needs to dry, and then I have to go in and clean them up. So like doing the legs alone was like a week. So it's like feet and legs together on both sides. Right. And then I'm also
it's
decaling.
Kind of like getting a basement built. Okay.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Maybe a little bit faster. Jordan, what do you got for us?
I got a couple ones really quick. First of all, my Movember is live as promised in last week's podcast. So definitely head down there, donate. I've already got like over $100. So, we're making some progress there. Nice. Hit that up. The other thing I wanted to talk about is we recently did the iPhone video that went out. And in that, I talked about ND filters. What I didn't reveal that both Chris and Jaron are aware of is the embarrassing truth about my ND filter use on iPhones, which is that it is very gaff taped and Rycoat sticky adhesive based. I just use a big normal ND filter and just glue it on that sucker. And you know what? It works fine. But if I'm doing a video about proper technique when shooting phone video, I'm like, oh God, okay, I'm going to get a proper solution for this. So I went and picked up Small Rig's little smartphone holder system, and then you can put a bunch of like polarizers. I grabbed a variable ND filter with that, which you can just spin. And if you're watching in video, you can see it get darker and brighter behind me right now. So that's great. The thing is, this sucks, like in a huge way. Yeah. Waste of money, unbelievably bad design. So if you can see here, you actually like twist this to bolt on like a super clamp almost onto the front LCD of your phone. So you've now got this colossal pressure point. Like if something hits this, it's just going to like completely put so much torque on that screen and twist it off. On top of that, you know what you use your screen on your phone for is touching things with your finger to make it do things. So inevitably, when I put this on, it's covering up like something very important. It covered up the screen record functionality when I was trying to do this video and I needed to record my screen. But just endless frustration with this.
To be fair, I was recording Jordan using that rig, so I had to deal with it, and it sucks. Yeah, I mean, it blocks your view, it blocks important buttons. I think Jordan, to be fair, I don't think you got the right attachment. You have to get optional accessories to add some stuff on, right?
Well, so you have to actually get Small Rig filters for this. So it said 52, and I was like, I have 52 filters, no big deal. But no, it's Small Rig specific 52 millimeter magnetic filters without threads on them.
That's very confusing because it's
so that was a second purchase to go along with it as well.
Wait, you expanded? You bought more for it?
Yeah, man, because I needed to. I had to shoot some more footage, and it's like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get some solid B-roll with it. So yeah, I threw away some money on something that makes me very angry. If anybody wants a cheap Small Rig phone adapter and variable ND filter,
Oh man, yeah. There needs to be a better solution for filter usage on smartphones. I'm surprised that.
Well, it usually involves buying a case.
Yeah, a cage is the correct answer. You can put
a cage
it in
or
front,
case,
or
a
case with filter threads on it, so it's securely mounted there. But I wanted to keep things nice and simple, and especially when we're hooking that Lexar in there. The appeal is it's so incredibly compact and light. But yeah, I haven't found a good solution yet. So let me know in the comments if you found a great case or rig free filter solution besides gaff tape, which is what I'm going back to after this. Anyways, I took up way too much time on what I've been up to. Those are my thoughts on that filter.
Wait, did you actually scratch the front of your lens with that rig as well?
No, it looked like I did, but it did buff out with that incredible, very durable glass Apple keeps talking about. But yeah, double check it when you're like sliding it back and forth to get it on the right part. You might actually just like smudge all of your lenses doing that and not realize until you start shooting video. It was a nightmare. Things didn't go well. I mean, we're all complaining except Jaron this week.
Actually, you know what? I have a positive story. I need to give me 15 seconds. So on that note, that reminded me, I use a dad wallet. There's my dad wallet, right? Everybody hates. Yeah, I know, gross, right? And on my iPhone 15, the cards line up on the screen, and when they rub on the front, they like etched lines on the front of my glass. Yeah, and so I don't know if all the Apple executives are watching right now. I'm sure they watch our episode all the time, our podcast. But I will say the iPhone 16, the etching is far more minor. In fact, a lot of it's like just rubbing off. There's a little bit of damage, but they said it was 2 times more durable.
Had it for a year.
Well, we'll see. But I mean, like, honestly, the 15 after 2 months, I was like, what is this? Is this like oil? What is this? Whereas this thing is actually, it's holding up much better. I will give it that.
What a weird niche test. But all right.
I told them, I was like, who else uses one of these wallets? Like,
they're like,
this reminds me of one more thing. During our video tour of the Nikon building, I couldn't help but notice in the draft, and many people noticed in the comments on the final, that there seems to be schmutz on the sensor of that camera, and they blamed, of course, the filmmaker, Jordan.
Me,
I would like to absolve Jordan. I want to absolve him of all responsibility here, because that is not his camera. We were provided cameras to use, and we did not notice. Like someone said, how could you not notice that while shooting? I challenge you to notice that while shooting and using only the LCD as your like viewfinder. You're not going to see it unless it's like a giant dot. Those little flakes that don't appear until you see them in editing are pretty common. But this is not Jordan's fault. This was a camera that clearly had not been cleaned in a while or had been subjected to elements. And please give him some slack.
It looks like someone took a cotton swab and just went like this above the sensor. And also we were shooting on a gimbal, so I couldn't look through the electronic viewfinder where I might have seen it. There's a chance, but who knows?
Yeah, even if you did, I don't even think we had the ability to clean it. So,
I've always got my Pentax gummy in my back pocket.
Okay,
not a problem.
Yeah. Well,
that's somewhat comment related, but now this is the official start of Never Read the Comments. I've got a few here that I wanted to go over with y'all. There's a YouTube comment from someone with no username. I believe it's just a space or a series of spaces. But we have started something here. I'm gonna blame the commenter who originated with.
We need a jingle for this.
Yeah,
like very romantic, sexy dream that they had.
Yeah, well, here's another dream, a PetaPixel related dream. Chris and Jordan were both really into a goal of fishing in every corner of the world in his dream. Sorry, Jordan.
That is a dream. That's a pipe dream.
My dream picks up with them in Hawaii, standing in the surf, but this is not a relaxing fishing outing. This is more of an extreme sport, as they are wearing wetsuits and protective gear like helmets and padding. Okay. We see them from Jaren's perspective.
So it is sexual.
We see them from Jaren's perspective as he films and narrates their endeavor from the beach. He is really having fun as the two struggle to stay on their feet in the heavy wind and waves. Just before my alarm woke me up, Jaren is yelling at the two of them to check out the sea turtle on their left. I want to point out that sea turtles are probably my favorite like non-mammal aquatic creature. I love sea turtles, so this does make sense. I would do this.
And the Hawaiian beaches are lousy with them. Yeah.
They then shifts the camera from the two of them who have been knocked into each other by a wave, and we're getting untangled and trying to stand up as I'm talking to viewers about the turtle. So
that sounds like a great episode. I think we should shoot it.
Yeah, Chris, extreme fishing.
Did you remember something very similar to this that's happened in our production history?
We were in the beaches of Hawaii. I was trying to fish in the surf. It was intense waves. Jordan decided to go for a swim because he loves to swim in the ocean, and the waves were too intense for that as well. So, needless to say, I didn't catch any fish. Jordan didn't really get any swimming done, and it actually ended very similarly. It was a failure.
That's the closest I've ever felt to actually getting sucked out into. Like, I got scared at one point when I got pulled back hard right off the top.
I would have
nope.
I would have just cast my rod into your flesh and like pulled you back in. I would have reeled you in. That'd be beautiful.
You'd probably aim for like my eyeball or something.
Well, that's a good hook point, like right
only because because it's got to be a place where the hook won't come out. So your eye socket would.
It can't be like my nipple or something, or it's just going to tear.
That would tear right out. Yeah. Jeez, plus, you'd like it. So. Anyways, I just want to let people know, actually, fishing can be incredibly extreme, not just in your dreams. I mean, surf fishing is a thing, and people get dressed up like full surf gear in the waves, stripping basket on their waist, and they're hauling huge rods to get cast out as far as possible. Steelheading, I mean, sometimes we're fishing for days on end, standing in frigid cold water, snow coming down, like. Fishing can be very extreme. It's not all relaxing, dry fly fishing in the chalk streams kind of stuff. There's some extreme stuff there.
Before we jump off this, I just want to say I want this to be a regular segment. No matter how boring, I don't care, or completely random. If you have a dream involving any of the three of us, I want to know about it, and you need to hit up Jaron or the YouTube comments immediately with reports.
Well, I feel like without you asking, that's already begun. So,
I just want to keep this rolling. This segment brings me great joy.
If at some point in the future we can do like one of those the Treehouse of Horror Simpson episodes where it's essentially we just actually recreate
a dream. That'd be amazing.
Just a series of dreams. All right, the next one is a comment from John Firewire. Chris, Jaron, and Jordan, just out of curiosity, what type of color temperature do you prefer in your homes? For example, I lean more towards tungsten warmer coloring, whereas some of my family members prefer a very white, bluish, cooler temperature. I'm just curious if you have a preference. I like purple.
Well, Jordan naturally breaks out a colorimeter and then he white balances that and sets a Kelvin rating, right, Jordan?
I do care about the Kelvin color temperature in my house. I think there's a fascinating history here. Do you guys remember happy lamps? Going back like maybe 15 years or so, because all your lights in your house were tungsten balanced. So they were like, look, this is a happy lamp. It'll simulate the sun in your house. It's a daylight balanced light fixture. And everybody looked at it as like, oh yeah, that's going to improve my mood. And that's what everyone talked about. And then all lights went daylight balanced, and now it feels like an office space, and daylight is oppressive and I hate it, and all I want when I'm in my cozy house is to be surrounded by beautiful tungsten light, ideally like 2700, even warmer than tungsten. That's my jam.
I prefer warmth as well. Maybe not 2700, but let's go mid threes. But I like the sort of comfort of warm lighting. I think that's what I've always grown up to. You know, we can open the windows if you want daylight, you know? So I really do like that sort of warmer balance. And I find like daylight balanced lights, they're not great. I don't love them. I don't think they make you happy. I agree with Jordan there. What I really dislike is the cold blue. Some people do this like cold blue. Often they call that daylight, but there's no way. It's like 6,500, 7,000 Kelvin lighting. And I don't know how people exist under that. It's like so cold and it makes your skin kind of look, I don't know. I don't like it.
That's how you color grade a movie to show that they're in a scary place.
I believe it's 9,000.
God.
That's too much. Yeah.
There's another one that goes up to 10 if you wanted to buy that.
Yeah.
I'm a warm white guy, so around 3,000.
Yeah.
So all of my lights are warm white.
100%.
Except in here where the ambient lights are usually some crazy color like it is
overpowered by RGB light everywhere.
As you can see, I have a lot of them.
In the bedroom, go for it. Classic red, hot. Why not?
I thought you were going to say, no, go for it. Go for the 10,000.
Just go Amsterdam whorehouse.
Get a dark room safe light.
Yeah, dark room safe light, or like, you know, maybe throw some yellow on, or like green, not really, but maybe like moody purple or blue.
Green
for
is
like
terrible in all
sexy Tom Cruise, like Kelly McGillis Top Gun makeout sesh. Like I go for it in the bedroom. Color in the bedroom.
Also, Philip Hue lights make your skin look like garbage. Don't buy those. Those have the worst CRI on them. So when you're just walking around the house,
there goes our Philips sponsorship.
On that.
Jeez,
that's fine.
You know what, Philips, if you're listening, I like your bulbs. I have them all over my house, and Jordan is wrong.
Jordan's wrong. Yeah, I've used a Philips colored LED in the bedroom. I think I just explained that, and it's tons of fun. So thank you, Philips,
Jordan,
for making my sex life
just not
exciting.
seeing the full spectrum of the skin tones under that.
Who cares about that when you're? Anyways,
let's keep
the podcast perfect grade.
That's right,
acceptable. Yeah.
What'd you say? Heavy petting. The last one is an email from Michael Thornton. To the publisher, editors, and the entire staff of PetaPixel, I've been reading PetaPixel for the last couple of years, and the serious reporting on the site just gets better and better. A while back, one of you wrote, perhaps apologetically, that the clickbait content on PetaPixel is necessary to help fund the more serious work. I've come to see that your promise is true, and over time you've proven that your folks are really delivering on the good stuff. Day after day, I appreciate and enjoy PetaPixel's coverage of the history and technology of photography. As well, I generally enjoy PetaPixel's coverage of historical events and changes through the eyes of photographers and photojournalists. I delight in your reporting of nature photography and awards around the world. I learn from your experience, explanations of photographic technologies and your gear reviews, and how can I not enjoy the podcasts of Chris, Jordan, and Jaron? To all of you at PetaPixel, editors, writers, administrative support, technical support, and all the other staff members, those tend to be the same people, by the way, thank you for producing such a fine website. Today, I signed up as a paid PetaPixel subscriber, and I look forward to a long and happy relationship with this website. Many thanks and admiration to all of you folks are fantastic. Michael,
thanks to you.
Thank you,
thank you
Michael.
very much, Michael.
I appreciate that quite a bit. I will say that the concept of clickbait is still to me, it's not what we're trying to do. It's more like we play to Google's algorithm so that we get pushed to news. And so we try to cover things that only we cover, and Google's let's push that. So that is where a lot of our traffic comes from. Yes.
It's a business. It's a business. We have to fund this business. We have fantastic staff. We have fantastic writers. I mean, Pasala, Matt, Jeremy. Now we brought on Chris Monlux. It's fantastic. I like Chris, so you should definitely check out his articles. Got lots of good freelancers. Our management's fantastic. Our editor-in-chief is lovely. And so, yes, I think it's a great website. It's still small. It still feels like grassroots, and we do try to be as journalistically integritatious as possible.
That's not a word.
It's like we're both having trouble saying what we're supposed to say this week.
I think integritatious is a fantastic word.
All words are made up, but that one's really
Let's ask our editor-in-chief.
Yeah, I wouldn't approve it.
For putting in an article.
I will say I am going to use that to say if any of you would like to support what we do here directly, and that includes Chris and Jordan, if you like them and would like to keep them employed, please sign up for a PetaPixel membership. We really appreciate it. We will be adding some perks to that in the coming weeks. But it really is very helpful to get support directly from our viewership and readership as opposed to having to lean on Google. If we get enough members, we probably won't have to play to Google, which means those stories that some of you don't like, we can pull back on, which I'd like to do. So become a member. See less of those. Thank you. All right. Let's move on to tech support. The first one is a speak pipe from Dan Duke. Hold on, I'm trying to play it.
Hey guys, it's Dan again. Wanted to thank you for answering my question about Olympus and how they might be able to take advantage of the nostalgia in the market. But today I wanted to ask, how come when I look at the wide market of lenses in our inventory at my store, and I see that we have so many different versions, version 2 and version 3 of a lot of lenses, specifically Canon in this instance, I was looking through. So, the 70-200 has so many versions, the 24-70 has a few iterations. How come the 100 millimeter macro 2.8 lens, that was one and done? They made that in 2009. They looked at it and they never, ever felt the need to iterate upon that idea. Until RF came out, they had to make a new iteration for that. But otherwise, they were perfectly happy. They will still, to this day, sell you a brand new 100 millimeter L IS, the 2.8 USM, what have you. How come they were so happy with that? Is that just something to do with the way that prime macro lenses work, that it's that there's a factually correct way to make it? Or could you explain why that might be the case? Thank you.
All right. Dan's got a nice voice.
It really does. Yeah.
Yeah, really nice voice. So Dan, there's the main reason I would say is, first off, 100 mils are primes, and primes are easy to make optically good as far as resolution requirements go. Whereas zoom lenses, I've had to kind of follow as megapixels and sensors go higher and higher. The zoom lenses have to be updated for more resolution, and there's more digital correction that can then be used to correct things like distortion and stuff. We've talked about that before. Whereas 100 millimeter macro, it's a good formula to make. It's easy to make. It's already going to be flat focusing, have minimal distortion, and they're sharp right off the bat. Also, autofocus requirements, macro doesn't necessarily need as advanced autofocus. I mean, again, that's arguable, but generally speaking, you're not in a rush. You're taking your time, and most professionals are going to manually focus or focus stack anyways. So I feel like it just kind of gives the manufacturers less priority required, less incentive maybe to have to update those, because the original formulas are already really sharp. They're already really good at what they do. And maybe that's why. And so only when new mounts come out do they have to be redone. And I mean, a good example of that is the RF 100 millimeter macro. It's stunningly good. I don't think they're going to have to update that anytime soon for the RF mount. Anytime soon.
I have that lens right now, and I don't like focus by wire. Otherwise, it's great.
Sure. Image stabilization can get better over time, but even then with IBIS and the bodies, even that's like less of a requirement to really start pushing.
Yeah, I think they were kind of struggling. Like, how are we going to justify a new RF version of this? Because most of the stuff the short flange back offers doesn't really affect a short telephoto macro. So they're like, oh, we're going to put in a thing where you can adjust the defocus areas of it. And it's basic. We didn't love it. I didn't find it useful at all, even for portraits, not really. So yeah, I think that's one of those things. I was talking to my friend Don Komarechka, who mostly does macro work, and he's like, just use SLR designs, because there's no benefit to the mirrorless designs on a macro specifically.
Right.
The next one is a comment from Violator. Hi there, longtime subscriber, first-time commenter here. You've mentioned that there's kind of not enough compact primes on the market right now. I remember the first party part. So I'd like to point your attention towards the Sigma I series primes, which are a pretty fresh line of optics, about less than or around 2 years. For some reason, there's not a lot of media coverage on these full metal lenses, supposedly with some interesting characters. So is there any possibility of you guys reviewing these? Watch out, I'll create my own YouTube channel and get all your views myself.
Ah, no.
Ooh. Go for it. Violators. Start violating your viewers. I think that would be awesome.
Oh, please don't say it like that.
Make a YouTube channel and violate your viewers. I think that would be awesome. It's a good suggestion. The Sigma I series are great little lenses. I don't know why there wasn't a ton of coverage. I mean, for us, honestly, it usually comes down to production cycles where things just get so busy and there's so many products to review, and yeah, we can't review them all.
I checked. So we have reviewed the 65, the 90, the 24. We did not do the 35 for potentially obvious reasons there. But we have reviewed quite a few of those, and they're absolutely outstanding lenses, especially if you're going photocentric. When Chris reviewed the S9 Panasonic, he just lived on those little Siggy L series.
Yeah. But I think we did a lot of that with DP Review, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So there, there's always that thing where it's like, oh, you guys haven't reviewed. It's like, yeah, I know. We're the guys who start channels over and over. So yeah, that's a little bit different.
Go find their reviews on a previous channel. Is what?
Yeah, deep review. our reviews of the contemporary lenses are on there, and yeah, I like them. I like a lot of them.
They just haven't brought one out actually since the PetaPixel switch.
Yeah.
All right. The next one is a speak pipe from Sky from Australia.
Hey gang, Sky here from Sydney, Australia, here to ask my first question. So yeah, let's get into it. I am about to do a bunch of traveling actually. And currently when I travel, I take two cameras. I've got an FX30 and a Nikon F2. FX30 is great. My issue is the Nikon F2, which is kind of a brick. So I would like to replace that with something smaller and hopefully lighter. I currently have two options before me. One is to stick with film and get something like a Contax T2. The other one is to switch back to digital. If I was to switch back to digital, I would like something that can recreate that feeling of shooting film and also potentially emulate the look of it as well. I'm not really sure if there's anything that can do that at the price point of, say, a Contax T2 or like a Nikon 35 Ti. So I would love some great suggestions if you guys have any. I'm totally fine to go secondhand with this. I don't really mind not buying brand new. But yeah, would love to know your thoughts. Keep up the podcast. I've been loving it. Thanks.
So before we answer this question, I just want to kind of give you guys a peek behind the veil, okay? So you can see the Wizard of Oz as he really is. So these speak pipes, we love these speak pipes. Up to this point, Jaron hasn't been playing them for us. He's been reading them off to us so that we can now, for like, this is like the first podcast now where we actually get to hear you guys speak, which is great, because otherwise Jaron would actually try to do an Australian accent for this,
which was
I thought it was pretty good.
I'm gonna miss that, okay? But I do appreciate your actual legitimate Australian accent, Sky. So
I was wondering if you're gonna bring that up.
I hope Jaron does it from time to time. Maybe he'll just throw it in there. Anyways, man. the obvious analog to what we're talking about here for the analog cameras that you're talking about would be Fujifilm's X100 series. You know, you get that fixed lens. It's that same kind of design, very sexy manual controls. And Fujifilm's the obvious choice too, because they do have film simulation modes, which simulate their films fairly effectively. I mean, I don't know. I think digital is always a great option. You have an analog camera. I know it's a brick, but at least you still have something you can shoot film with. I think it would make sense to have a digital camera and the convenience that goes with that. So I would say go X100 series.
How do you propose he finds an X100? Because I've heard there's like, here in Calgary, there's like an underground fight club where the grand prize is like an X100F or something. Yes. How do you propose he gets his hands on an X100 model at this point?
I think because Sky sounds like a very fit and healthy.
Oh, so he would win this fight club.
I think he could win the fight club.
Maybe it's a global network of these going on.
So, yeah, or good luck getting a Ricoh GR. I mean, but that's another great option too, but also hard to find. Last thing I'll throw in there is get like a XT30 version 2 or something like that. Last time I checked, I think Contax T2s, 35 Ti's, you're in that sort of $1,000 to $1,300 price range used ish. That's my guess. So yeah, you kind of be in a similar price point for digital.
I was also going to suggest Fujifilm, but like I really ended up liking the Nikon ZF when I looked at the files. So
sure,
just some little bit of raw file configuring. So I took a picture of a Nikon employee or executive really while I was there on both my FTN and the ZF, and basically the same photo. And with just a little bit of shifting, I made it look as though I had taken both on film. One was just a little bit sharper, but I think that had to do more with aperture than anything else. Mm-hmm. And I liked the results. It's not going to fit within the budget you just suggested, but I do think that it's possible to get a camera with that experience, and then you can edit the RAWs to actually look pretty filmy if you really want to.
I mean, that's a good point, though, too. Like a Nikon ZFC would be more affordable. And it actually, like, I love that camera because it actually does capture the experience of shooting my Nikon FE, which is my first analog camera that I still use. And it really does mimic that experience and the fun of that while giving you a digital solution. I wish there was more prime lens support for that, but hopefully that's gonna come along.
Chris legitimately loves that camera. He brings it up constantly.
Yeah, even though, maybe, technically it's not as great a camera, even the best value for the dollar. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I want it.
The next question is a YouTube comment from RYSZB. Are there any AF lenses for mirrorless with a mechanical manual focus ring? I've just bought an Olympus 12 f2 and was a little surprised that it's focused by wire, despite having a manual focus clutch. To make things worse, encoder's resolution is too low and it's impossible to make small adjustments. It's not a motor issue because it is possible to focus between these manual focus steps, in quotes, using autofocus. Are all mirrorless lenses like this? Do I have to choose between AF and mechanical manual focus? As I mentioned just a few bits ago, I do not like focus by wire. Jordan also does not like focus by wire. I've watched his video. So yeah, I don't know. What's the answer here?
Jordan, you don't like focus by wire. I mean, explain it. It's rough. It's hard. I mean, this is something you deal with all the time.
Yeah, I mean, classic focus by wire is where if you move the lens slowly, it's going to make smaller adjustments, which makes it really hard to do a repeatable, like if I want to pull focus from one thing to the other. But the big issue as well is that delay. It's very easy to, with a focus by wire, overshoot because there's a slight delay in it actually moving that lens element with the motor. And the tricky thing there is it really comes down to all kinds of different designs. Like I remember that was an issue with the Olympus 12. I was recently battling with the OM Systems 90 millimeter macro, because the focus point I wanted was kind of like right in between two settings on it. And then, just clicked it to autofocus and boop, it went right to the subject. That's something you can really fight with. The best ones that I've seen, the Panasonic focus clutch options for L mount and micro four thirds, like the 10 to 25, 25, 50, 24 to 70, 70 to 200 are extremely responsive. They almost feel like you've got a mechanically coupled ring. And the best one is the Leica Q3. I was shocked that this, actually going back to the original Q, that this is not an actual mechanically coupled lens. It's just an insanely responsive manual focus. Yeah. It feels like you're actually coupled. And we talked to Leica and they're like, no, that's actually
so it's possible
by wire lens. It is absolutely possible. And hopefully it's going to keep getting better and better. Like more recent designs feel more responsive. I think a lot of the third-party lenses like Tamrons and Sigmas, or Tamron specifically, you can set them to be linear focus with the software, and they feel incredibly responsive. So hopefully this is just like growing pains of mirrorless, and eventually we're going to feel more like we've got a mechanically coupled focus ring in these focus-by-wire designs, because I'm not aware of anything for mirrorless that's a true mechanically coupled focus ring, unless it's a manual focus lens.
Maybe that's a reason for that 100 millimeter macro we were just talking about to get a second version, because I would very much like that manual focus ring to be better. It is frustrating. I also don't love that when I let the camera go to sleep, because it saves battery, it just completely resets my focus. It is frustrating.
For time lapse, it's disastrous.
It's
and again,
for scanning film, it's terrible.
Oh yeah, man, that'd be awful.
I hate it. All right, next one is a speak pipe from Jeremy.
Hello, Chris, Jordan, and Jaron. This is Jeremy, and I'm looking for a relatively affordable video-only system. I'm mostly going to be shooting with vintage or anamorphic glass, so I will probably be using either the PD Movie or DJI LiDAR follow focus solutions, and am trying to rig the camera out on as small a gimbal as possible. I'm looking at a Sony FX30, a Fuji X-H2S, or a real curveball here, the Sigma FP. The Sigma FP is the cheapest body used despite being full frame, and can output 12-bit cinema DNG to an SSD, while the FX30 has the best in-body autofocus and the X-H2S has the best IBIS and can shoot open gate, enabling anamorphic with a stronger squeeze. The APS-C bodies, despite being more expensive, have cheaper anamorphic lenses available. Am I missing another option? What do you, mostly Jordan, think is the move for pushing hybrid systems into entry-level cine rigs? Thanks.
You guys like my sweatshirt?
Ooh, I do.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that?
It's FP Day was a couple weeks ago.
And,
yeah, I got a Sigma FP sweater. Anyway.
I'd want it to be the top with the cinema stills switch on it. That's the most iconic part of that design, I think.
That's on a gimbal is the one place I might actually use the FP. But what do you think, Jordan?
They all have some limitations to them. Like the big thing with the FP is I'd have to go back, but every one of the different encoding modes had some weird limitation. Like the 10-bit recording was very soft. The RAW, I believe, line skips if you're at 12-bit, but if you go to 10-bit RAW, then you get an oversampled image. There were a bunch of weird trade-offs there, so make sure those work. And of course, you're sacrificing IBIS, and the autofocus is basically non-functional on them. So I do think the ones that you've picked out there make a lot of sense. The FX30 is the best autofocuser by far. But yeah, I would love to see like a better integration of like de-squeezing and the stabilizers, the old Sony version that really doesn't do much besides take out the jitters when you're trying to hold the camera static. The X-H2S, I think, is actually a really interesting and often overlooked option. It's the widest dynamic range you'll get in a Fujifilm APS-C, very comparable to what we see in full frame. But yes, the autofocus does struggle. But if you're planning to adapt lenses, I think that's actually probably my favorite option of the ones that you've given there. And being able to shoot that open gate if you're planning to play with anamorphic is going to be a big deal. The FP offers it as well. But again, that's a weird camera that I've always just fought with. One thing you might want to look at that is within this budget, S5 IIs from Panasonic are very affordable right now. And that has killer stabilization, pretty good autofocus, anamorphic de-squeeze, and you'll move up to a full frame sensor with a lot of adapting options for third-party lenses. So that might be worth checking as well. But of the three you've given me there, I think the X-H2S is the most flexible option.
All right. Last one of the week is an email from Craig. Hey guys, I'm one of those cursed individuals who falls in love with a hobby they can't afford. I have been a hobbyist nature and wildlife shooter since 2011 and started off with a used Nikon D3100 gifted to me by my wife. For the past few years, I have been using the D7100 and managed to acquire a nice used 200 to 500 millimeter lens. I've been very happy with the results, but it's time to save the pennies and upgrade. As much as I would like to be one of those guys that has a backup Z8 in case their backup Z9 breaks, I'm on an extremely limited budget. At the moment, my best option for price performance would be a used D500. As a Nikon shooter, I can't help but feeling that those of us who would benefit from a D500 style mirrorless APS-C camera that wasn't aimed at content creators but still, quote, affordable, have been left out of the equation. Every time I see an article or video about a possible successor to the D500, like a fabled Z90, there seems to be numerous comments in favor of such a camera. Am I in the minority here, or is Nikon dropping the ball in this regard? Love the podcast. I listen to it at work every week. Thanks for all that you guys do, and have a good day. Craig from Tennessee.
Thanks, Craig. As somebody who has 3 hobbies, or maybe more that I can't afford, I totally understand. And you know what? If this was last week, I probably would have said, yeah, Nikon needs to do something, but they have now. I mean, there's...
I believe there's a reason we might have pushed this by a week, if I recall correctly.
The Nikon Z50 II, it does have the latest focusing algorithms in 3D tracking, which is really cool. I mean, that is a nice feature. And that is partly why I really enjoyed using it. And go for it. I think that would do a great job. It would work well for wildlife. You could adapt your 200 to 500 to that with an FTZ adapter, so you don't even need to replace that. And it would give you that capability. I mean, the D500 is a lovely camera. The Z50 II, though, is going to give you the same sensor. It's going to make things more compact. It still has an excellent grip, so things are going to feel balanced. And then it modernizes you to then be able to move into mirrorless Z-mount stuff. So, yeah, I think that's a great choice, and that's exactly why Nikon released it.
I will say we talked with the Nikon executive I mentioned that I took a portrait of, and we asked them specifically about higher performance Nikon Z-mount APS-C cameras. And it just seems like I'll probably get the full quote at some point when I can write a story about it. But it seems to me that their focus, I think, is going to be on entry level. Is that the gist that you got from their answer, guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the lens lineup shows that too.
Yeah. Entry level, but in Craig's particular case, because he's already using APS-C and shooting a lot of nature and wildlife, I think it could still make a lot of sense. You're going to get that.
I'm just saying we're not going to get a D500 again, which is I don't think so. If I would love it. I love that camera.
Yeah. If that's what you're looking for, that XH series from Fuji is really that. Yeah. It's a professional APS-C camera that nobody else is making.
Yeah. Or you go Z8. Which is basically like the D800, D850 of that. But yeah, don't get into gardening or target shooting or fly fishing. Okay, because that's
or Gundam model building.
Or Gundam model building.
It's addictive and expensive. All right, well, that's going to do it for tech support. Let's move on and finish out with the feel-good story of the week. Last week, we stumbled across a Reddit post that pointed us to one of those government surplus sale sites. And one of the schools in Louisiana was attempting to get rid of its massive 20 by 24 film print camera thing.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, boy, if we had unlimited budget as a publication, wouldn't it be fun to take them up on this? They were selling it for $300, but the
deal.
Catch, right? It's no basically catch. Please take this from us. Except you have to go get it.
What?
And you have to also responsibly remove it, and then you have to transport it. So the costs of picking up this device would be significantly higher than $300, and it's not designed to do anything like how I would want to use it, which is mount it to a back of a trailer and have Chris drive it to Calgary and use it to take landscape photos on the way. Because you can apparently still buy 20 by 24 film. Harman makes it.
That's also very expensive.
I think bananas. what did somebody in the comments actually put out how much it costs per sheet? It was a lot. Yeah. And then you'd have to get
$35 a shot, right?
57.
57?
This was used as...
Stop bitching about the price of film, everyone.
$57 a shot.
And then it's like, you're going to have to get the right lens. I mean, I'm assuming this was a copy lens for artwork reproduction. Like, you're going to want a proper lens for this, for landscape shooting off the back of a trailer. And I think it's motorized, so I don't know
how to
power that.
We got batteries. We have the technology.
Yeah, get that backpack kit, the weird exoskeleton backpack, and plug that into your van.
I'm shocked that they're not paying people $300 to take this out. Like,
yeah, the listing's gone.
Okay, well, there you go.
Someone either said, yeah, sure, or nobody took them up on it, and they have to come up with another way to get rid of it. Yeah.
I bet it was Ted Forbes. That's my guess.
That is a
Super
Ted Forbes
heavy
project.
Well, there you go.
That would have been fun. That is what I was thinking about. Like, what could we make
20
you
by
do?
24.
Yeah.
I'd be happy with 8 by 10. Like, I don't think we need to go that far, but whatever.
Imagine if you actually got one usably great landscape out of that after trying several.
You would do contact prints.
It would be beautiful.
You do beautiful contact prints. Yeah.
Well, at any rate, that's how we're going to end
it. Let the dream die.
Yeah. Well, I like to think of myself thinking, wouldn't it have been nice? And that feels good. So at any rate, that's it for this week. I want everyone to say goodbye to Jordan. We will not have him for the next 2 weeks.
Oh, I thought you were firing me.
What a way to do it, right? No, next week, Jordan is off. He is taking a much-needed short vacation. It'll just be me and Chris next week. And then the week after that, we are off. So we won't have a podcast the week
on an adventure.
But we will be back the week after. But Chris and I will see you next week. Jordan, wave goodbye. We'll see you in 3. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye.